Uh-oh, there. Testing. Okay. Okay, so not to reward everyone who's here early.
Recording in progress.
Welcome all to the Palo Alto Historic Resources Reconnaissance Survey Community Meeting. This is our second meeting. Some of you may have been here at the first meeting back in April, I believe. And tonight we have members of the Historic Resources Board. To my left is our chair.
Hi, I'm Alyssa Eagleson-Tislevich. Thank you all for coming this evening.
And then we have three more members of the HRB over here.
Christian Keys.
Caroline Holden.
Okay. So that's a quorum. 4 out of 7. We have 7 members of our Historic Resources Board. So, and I'm Amy French. I'm the Chief Planning Official and the liaison to the Historic Resources Board, among other hats. To my right, we have Christine Dykus. She's with Page and Turnbull, our consultant, qualified historic preservation consultants. And to her right, Barrett Reiter. I don't know if I said it right. Yeah. Also with Page and Turnbull. And we have Isabel Castellano with M Group, who's helping us with outreach. You may have seen her name written there for conversations that we're going to be having with property owners. And Christina Pauliscate with the City of Palo Alto. She's helping us with all of the historic program projects that come through and resource evaluations, and Veronica Dow, who is helping us with this meeting and all of the others that the planning department holds in the public forum. So yeah, thank you for coming and welcome. I guess at some point we'll know who you.
One of the questions there, the address, that's what I mean. I have a file cards, can locate the address. Yeah. I don't even know what to put in.
Okay.
My address, what it is.
Okay, maybe we'll take a moment at some point and do the
I'd
we'll
like
do
to know which property are. Some are not mine. So
got it.
I'd like to go through this when you got a chance.
Yes, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. So just proceeding to now that we've done introductions, and those of you who are here are most likely property owners, received a notice or some such thing. We are going to have covering again the reason why we are here this evening and why we are doing this survey. We're going to have other background information and cover and we have another member of the HRB, Samantha Roman, Vice Chair, that walked in. So we're going to be talking about the survey findings, which we presented previously. We will describe the nomination memos and process for nominations. We will clarify the targeted date, the target dates for the HRB meetings to review the nomination recommendations, and we'll explain the designation criteria. Then we'll take an opportunity to hear questions from the public and provide answers as we can, and delve a little bit into incentives and some case studies of those incentives. So for helping understanding the significance of listing on the city's inventory. So with that, I will go to the next slide. I think we did introductions. Oh, and Ruth Todd is not here, but she is was on the list of folks with Page and Turnbull. So some of you may be familiar. The historic inventory that we have in the city of Palo Alto is from 1979. That inventory includes the Professorville Historic District south of here. It includes individually listed properties, categories 1, 2, 3, and 4 throughout the city. More in the north part of the city, of course, but there are some farther down. Then we have a couple of historic districts that are listed on our inventory, including Professorville, as I noted. And then there are some individual buildings on the National Register in Palo Alto. So that's online. We have those on our webpage, so you can look at the list of addresses. And there's also the forms from that original 1979 inventory. So then what happened in 1997 through 2001 is we had another survey. Typically cities that are historic, have historic properties, do surveys much more often than we do them here. But ours are pretty well spaced apart at this point. So this was, this process did also involve a consultant, and the result was that 165 properties were found to be eligible for the National Register. So these are really the same properties that we're looking at now that were identified 20 plus years ago. And a few more besides that are California Register eligible that were studied since that time. So there were, in those DPR forms provided at that time, there were historical context in Palo Alto, and it provided a background. So there were the forms, the DPR forms for each of the properties. There was also kind of a report, a study that kind of talked about the context of Palo Alto in historic development. So here we get to our purpose. So council provided direction to staff and the HRB to take a look at these same properties that had surfaced in the year 2000 and forwarded at that time to the Office of Historic Preservation at the state level. So to see if they're still there, are they still existing, to see what the integrity is, and see if they're still eligible for listing on a register. And then furthermore, to bring the properties forward that could be eligible for the city's inventory, the city's local register. So we wanted to learn, so that was the first part of this. I think this might be my last slide. I'm winding down. That we're trying to verify the presence of the properties identified as individually eligible for the California Register. This happened subsequent to that 1997 to 2000 survey. We've been looking at other properties as a result of their comprehensive plan policies. It's a little detailed there, but again, come forward with recommendations for nomination at what level, category 1, 2, 3, 4, or nothing on the city's inventory. So there's a map that shows where all of these are.
Okay.
So turn it over to you, Christine.
So that's a little summary, a kind of a recap from our first community meeting. As Amy just said, we are looking at properties that were previously identified as historically significant for either the National Register of Historic Places or the California Register of Historical Resources. So we're taking another look at all of those. And then because they've been found historically significant, if we continue to agree with that, and they still exist. Some have been demolished since 2001, we're nominating them to the local inventory, and there are benefits and incentives to being on the local inventory, which we'll be talking about later in this presentation. So we've already done the survey. We went out and looked at each of these properties from the public right-of-way in the street a few months ago. And so there were 165 properties that were identified as National Register eligible. 11 were actually previously listed in the Palo Alto Historic Inventory in the intervening years, or actually I think even before that. They were already on the local register, and then they were after that found eligible for the National Register. So we're not looking at those again. 11 had been demolished in the last 20 or so years. And then we saw that 4 have been significantly altered and have lost what we call integrity. So they've been changed so much that they don't represent their period of historic significance anymore. So that left 139 National Register eligible properties. And then on top of that, 11 properties that were identified in historic resource evaluations in more recent years as eligible for listing in the California Register of Historical Resources. And these ones we found to remain present and appear to retain historic integrity from what we could see from the street. And historic integrity, as I just said, is the ability of a property to convey its historic significance through its physical characteristics. So that's what we were looking at when we were out conducting the survey from the street. A little bit of information here. This is high level in case anybody has to run. We'll be going into case studies of some of these benefits in the later part of this presentation, but we do want to present some of the benefits and if you can consider them drawbacks or neither for being listed on the Palo Alto Historic Register. This kind of pro-con was requested in our first community meeting that we had back in the spring, so we wanted to present it here. So again, we'll talk a little bit more about what each of these things mean later, but we want to present it to you now. In the Palo Alto Preservation Ordinance, there are a number of benefits that are listed, and those include the application of the California Historic Building Code, which can provide some leniency if you're doing a proposed project and you have a historic building. In addition, the Palo Alto Building Code and Municipal Code offer some development incentives to assist owners of historic resources. Again, if you have some kind of project or alterations. R1 zoned parcels that have 2 homes, one is listed as historic, can create a flag lot. Income producing properties may be able to apply for federal historic rehabilitation tax credits, which provide a tax break on your property income tax. And the Palo Alto Planning Department is available to provide essentially free design guidance regarding proposed projects, and Page and Turnbull helps with that kind of consultation when needed or when requested. And then there's a potential for property tax reduction incentive through the Mills Act program, which is another kind of tax benefit, tax break, if the council adopts the program, and every city can decide if they want to have a Mills Act program and kind of tailor it to that city. And I know that the HRB has been discussing this and the desire to create a Mills Act program for a while. So this is maybe a potential incentive for the future. Some drawbacks include a common fear about historic properties and review procedures, the concern that maybe there's a more onerous process if you have alterations that you want to make. Major alterations or demolition may undergo review by the HRB, but it's only for certain types of projects. But there's a general concern about that from property owners. And environmental review or the California Environmental Quality Act may be required, and that could add a little bit more time and cost if you have a project. And then neither a benefit nor a drawback. If you have a historic property that's on the inventory, there's no requirement to restore your property back to what it appeared to be previously. There's no restrictions on interior alterations, and there are plenty of flexibility with change to other areas of the property. And you would be unable to apply SB 9, which is one of the state housing laws that was passed in recent years, to single family residential zone property, which means that you wouldn't be able to subdivide or create a duplex if you do have a historic property. So there is so it protects the historic property, but it means that you can't apply this kind of change to your property.
The rehabilitation tax credit, is there additional like filings or like Do I need to be in a national registry to apply for that, or is it just the all to historic registry?
That's a great question. We'll be talking about that more later, but I will say just briefly right now, since you asked, that there is a process to first identify that it would be eligible for the National Register, which for these properties, these have started out by being found eligible for the National Register. Now we're just nominating them to the local register. So that should be a given that it would be eligible for the National Register. And then at the end of a federal tax credit project, you would need to actually designate the property. It's part of the process.
But then it would need to be listed as a national.
Yes.
Which means I would be subject to the national requirement.
Well, in general, the National Register is honorary, but you do get this incentive if you go through the process of applying. So there aren't any additional limitations for being on the National Register, but we can talk about it a little bit more later. We just wanted to share some of this first. So moving on, what we really want to focus on tonight is where we are now and what the next steps are. We reviewed 150 properties for designation to the Palo Alto Historic Inventory. Again, these were properties that were previously identified for California Register or National Register criteria, and we have translated those criteria to apply to the Palo Alto Historic Inventory designation criteria, which are a little bit different, but we're going to walk through what that looks like in some later slides. We have created, I guess we're in the process of creating memos that include a summary of those 2001 survey findings, a summary of our 2023 survey findings. So whether the property still exists, whether it still retains integrity, and a little bit of an assessment of whether the significance criteria identified in the 1997 to 2001 survey still appear relevant, a recommendation for designation criteria and the categories of the Palo Alto Historic Inventory, and then we are going to append the prior historic evaluation to that memo. So the prior historic evaluation is the survey forms from circa 2001. We call those DPR forms, which is the California Department of Parks and Recreation, but they're basically the state's historic survey forms, and they have background historic information. So they substantiate the significance statement. So we will append either that or the historic resource evaluation if that was the basis of identification for significance in prior studies. Page and Turnbull received initial feedback from the HRB in, I guess, a month or two ago in a hearing regarding the Palo Alto historic categories and how to associate them with the National Register and California Register criteria. So we moved forward after their agreement with our methodology. And the memos will be made available at least 1 week before each HRB hearing with the HRB packet, which will be posted online. So any property owner will have an opportunity to review the material that has been collected and the significance finding about your property, and you'll know which hearing your property will be heard at for the HRB. We have those lists as handouts tonight. There's also a list posted on the back window there with the dates and each property. And we'll talk a little bit more about how we came up with these lists or groupings of properties as we continue in the presentation.
What's HRB stand for?
Historic Resources Board. Good question.
These good people here.
Yes, yes, we have several members of the HRB with us tonight.
Sorry, are you mailing the forms out to the owners? Are they just online?
Amy?
Let's start with the handouts over here. If there are not enough of them, we could make some more available before this shows the dates of the HRB meetings and the property addresses for which meeting. But we're certainly going to be sending out notices to those who are on deck for November 9th, in the coming, later this week, notices and a link to where they can see, the work that's been done. So we say a week before, because that's when the packet goes to the HRB, but, we are endeavoring to get that material out to the owners, early, sooner than before, excuse me.
Hey, man, is it possible to mail the DPR sheets to the owners so that it's clear what is going to be discussed?
We we may not be able to get that done in a couple of days. So it takes quite a bit of time to assemble those pieces of paper. So we're hoping that the link will be sufficient for this week.
It will be quite a packet for every person, every owner. There is an introduction, several pages that describe the National Register and California Register criteria, and then the methodology for relating those to the local criteria, as well as what we're seeing here on the screen now, which is generally 1 to 2 pages for every property for this nomination memo, as I described in the last slide. I know it's very small here, but as I mentioned, it provides a summary of the 1997 to 2001 survey findings for National Register, or if the property was found eligible for the California Register in a historic resource evaluation, that is there instead. And then our conclusions from this 2023 Reconnaissance survey summary, which is generally observed alterations. Does the property retain integrity? Does the property appear to retain its significance as identified in the previous studies? And then another page, a couple of images as well, and then another page that will outline which criteria for the local inventory the property is significant under, and then the category. And we're going to talk about this a little bit more in detail, but there are 4 categories for the local inventory. And then appended to that nomination memo will be the original documentation. So either the 2001 DPR forms, which are sometimes a few pages long, or a historic resource evaluation, which is often about 30 pages or more.
You said that the properties that have been identified as historically significant prior to year 2001, that they had not been re-evaluated. Is that what you're saying?
That's correct. This is the first time we're taking another look at these properties that in 1997 to 2001, during a citywide survey, 165 properties were identified as eligible for listing in the National Register of Historic Places. Now we're looking at them again, confirming that they still retain historic significance. And because they have historic significance, they should be eligible for listing in the Palo Alto Historic Inventory. So our process now is to nominate them to the local inventory, which provides benefits and incentives for having historic resources.
And is that a process in place for people once they are nominated to be removed from the list?
Well, we are going to focus on next steps of that process right now. Or in a bit.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna go through a little bit of what's gonna be in the background whenever you get that HRB packet, and it's.
Still do some question, please. We can be up to ask us some question.
We would like to. Yeah, we would like to get through this process because we do think you'll want to know what these steps are. And then we have a period of Q&A if you have questions about the process. And then after that Q&A, we're going to talk about in more depth about some of those incentives and benefits for being on the inventory, and then another Q&A at the end. Just so we can keep going.
Okay. I'm gonna cover what's in here as background material on that packet that has the list. So I know people are kind of flipping through, I'm gonna explain that and then you have it to kind of take with you and read through some more. So because all of these properties were previously identified as eligible for either the National Register or the California Register, we started with the 4 criteria of significance for both of those registers. They use the same criteria. California Register uses numbers, whereas National Register uses letters. So if you see criteria National Register A, it's the same as California Register 1. Those properties are significant under events. They're associated with events that have made a significant contribution to the broad patterns of our history. And then for criteria B or 2, that is related to persons associated with the lives of significant persons in our past. And then criteria C or 3, which is related to architecture, embodies the distinctive characteristics of a type, period, region, or method of construction, represents the work of a master, or possesses high artistic values. And then criteria D or 4, we often call information potential, has yielded or may be likely to yield information important to history or prehistory. This one is usually more associated with archaeology or kind of the built structure itself, and no properties are being discussed under D or 4, so we can kind of ignore that one. But for the purpose of this, you really want to think about events, persons, and architecture as the 3 themes that these properties have previously been identified under. So then we looked at the Palo Alto Historic Inventory criteria. There are 6 criteria, so it has a bit of a broader scope than the 4 for National Register and California Register. They're just kind of split up differently. So we've inserted persons, events, and architecture in brackets within each of these. So it starts to show you kind of where the overlap is. So if you have a property that was identified as significant with a particular person, it would likely be significant under criteria 1 for the Palo Alto inventory. So this allows us to kind of correlate those different previously identified criteria with the Palo Alto inventory criteria. And you can see here that they tend to focus on architecture. There are 4 related to architecture. So if you have a property that was found significant before under National Register criteria C for its architecture, it may be significant under criteria 2 and another criteria. Maybe it's a good example of an architectural style and it was designed by a significant architect and it's possibly listed under criteria 2 and 5. So you start to kind of see how these align. So once we establish this kind of correlation between the National and California Register and the local inventory criteria, we then moved on to these 4 categories that I know we've talked a lot about at our previous meeting, and we'll discuss here. Category 1 is an exceptional building of preeminent national or state importance. These buildings are meritorious works of the best architects, outstanding examples of a specific architectural style, or illustrate stylistic development of architecture in the United States. These buildings have had either no exterior modifications or such minor ones that the overall appearance of the building is in its original character. So when we first approached these categories, we realized that we kind of needed to create a threshold by which to fit in all of these buildings across the 4 categories. So one of the things that we presented to the HRB in August was our approach to kind of creating those threshold groupings as we moved these properties into these different categories. We reviewed properties that were already listed as well as really focused on these definitions. And the threshold we created for category 1 was properties that were designated or constructed by prominent architects and builders previously identified as significant or are excellent examples of a style. We also looked at the language in the category 1 definition that says preeminent national or state importance. And that is where properties that are significant for events that are like at a national level, we have one actually that had an international impact. Those properties would also then kind of be upgraded to a category 1 because they meet that national or state importance level. So category 2 is a major building of regional importance. These buildings are meritorious works of the best architects, outstanding examples of an architectural style, or illustrate stylistic development of architecture in the state or region. and we'll return to state or region. A major building may have some exterior modifications, but the original character is retained. So again, here we have this major building category. These 4 categories really do focus on architectural significance of buildings. They don't fully correlate to the 6 criteria themselves. Those 6 criteria represent a broader swath of properties that include people, events, and even rarity of a building, or the fact that a business that was important to the city once was there. There's one criteria about that. I think it's 4. And so this is where we then started to create our threshold for category 2 to kind of broaden that definition outside of pure architecture and allow for the other rich stories about the history of Palo Alto to come into the actual story that we're preserving. So the threshold for category 2 is properties that are good examples of a style or a rare building type. Associations with individuals who are found to have made significant professional or personal accomplishments that demonstrate and enrich the history of Palo Alto are also represented under category 2. So that's where that person's significance comes in. And then category 3 or 4 is a contributing building, which is a good local example of an architectural style and relates to the character of a neighborhood grouping in scale, materials, proportion, or other factors. A contributing building may have had extensive or permanent changes made to the original design, such as inappropriate additions, extensive removal of architectural details, or wooden facades resurfaced in asbestos or stucco. So our threshold for category 3, we sort of took a step back and looked at contributing buildings as buildings that sort of would contribute to like a historic district is often the way we would talk about it. Buildings that are part of the streetscape allow for the feel of the neighborhood to continue. And so our threshold for category 3 is properties that are good examples of early development patterns or are common or typical buildings that retain their historic integrity to a very high degree. These buildings are not particularly rare, but have very good to excellent historic integrity. And then for category 4, it's very similar, but that the integrity level has diminished. They have been altered to a higher degree and may have good to poor historic integrity. So buildings that are more altered would kind of be downgraded to a 4.
Can you just describe a little bit that sentence? Buildings are not particularly rare and have a very good to excellent historic integrity. Just the.
Yeah. So they're not like the last one of its type. It's not like the only one that was built in Palo Alto. If a building is that rare, it would likely be a category 2 because it is like this last connection to that either style or moment or history of farming or something like that. Whereas with this, there would probably be a few of that type, and maybe it's not the most rare, but it is one of the last that represents a development pattern. If that helps.
Yeah. What you just said, I'm really confused by what you said about category 1, that the threshold, like if I look at these are a lot oriented to architectural style. When I read criterion 1 in the city, it says structure site identifies the lives of historic people in person with whom important events in the city. That sounded to me like the way you described category 2.
Yes.
But so I'm just trying to get exceptional building, meritorious work with best architects, outstanding specific style. So is that, how does category 1 vary from categories 3 and 4? And is it, I thought like category 1, when I first read it in the cities thing, associated with live and historic people, I thought, you know, Herbert Hoover lived in the house or Steve Jobs lived in the house.
Yeah, so we have to separate category from criterion. So there's 6 criterion for the historic inventory that are what you could be eligible for having significance related to that criteria. But then once you have that criteria that you're going to be designated for, then you have a category assigned. You can be a category 1 building that has international or national importance because of the person who lived there or the architecture, or you could still be the same criteria listing, but a category 2 because you only have state level significance. So there's kind of 2 steps. First, you have to select the criterion for designation and then the category that the property is designated under. So it's like a two-step thing.
Can I get a
Yeah.
So you're rewriting kind of the categories because the categories don't actually match the criteria.
We're
there's a-
trying
there's a
to,
basic-
yeah.
There's a basic problem there. So you've done that rewriting. What's the status of your rewriting? Has that been approved by the HRB?
So that's
Or
what
is
we
this
took to
your-
HRB.
So,
Yeah.
and they have said, cool, these are the new threshold, these are the new categories, or they just said, we'll think about it.
I mean, I can let HRB speak to this if you want, or I can.
Yeah, so the question that was primarily before us had to do with the inclusion of specifically properties related to historic persons. Because that wasn't fully specified in our category designation where a property with that particular criterion would go. So that's when we approved the listing of those as category 2s. But my understanding is that the rest of it is unchanged.
Okay, so this, what you're presenting represents the way that the HRB now views the categories.
Yes.
Okay.
So is it the person who lived there or is it the architect that designed it? Or is it both? I'm just.
Either one could be a,
Builders, our next example, so in category 2, a major, so is category 1 national? Is that what you said? That category 1 is somebody who's nationally important and category 2 is regionally important? I don't understand the difference, I'm sorry, between category 1 and 2.
Yes, I think that's accurate.
Yeah, and that's exactly
Category
what the
one.
description says
Mhm.
in the packet.
Yeah.
So, excuse me, that is very confusing, so, for a speculative question.
Mhm.
That, the house that, occupied by, Sergey from Google, would it become historically significant? And, because we are talking about people that live there has internationally known
Mhm.
reputation, or I'm just wondering, like, the residents of Governor Leland Stanford.
Yeah.
For example,
Yeah, so significance of the person is one of the more difficult ones. I will say that for the properties that we've looked at, there is no like Steve Jobs invented Apple in this building. It's immediately internationally, we don't have any of those. It's more people that were significant to local Palo Alto history. And so those are a lot of the properties that I worked on and went through to figure out how long they lived in a home. Is it the primary residence associated with their productive work, their professional accomplishments, their personal accomplishments, and try to figure out whether this is that property or whether they moved every 2 years and they lived in 10 properties, then this one probably isn't. It doesn't rise to a level where we would say it's significant.
So if that is the case, what is the purpose of, the local significance contributes to the richness of our, I'm just like, not very clear result.
Yeah. So all of the properties that were significant for a person, I think for the most part, were found to be under category 2, which is what we said was where there would be a person with, this text. Good examples of style, associations with individuals who are found to have made significant professional or personal accomplishments related to Palo Alto. So there wasn't anyone who was like nationally significant and we jumped that property up to a category 1. They all kind of were at this level of local significance where they were either involved in like civic accomplishments of Palo Alto, personal accomplishments of Palo Alto. We have a Olympic athlete that was very important, that kind of thing.
And again, this was all historic information that was included in the 1997 to 2001 findings and documentation. And so we're just verifying and then correlating the previously found reasons for significance to the Palo Alto inventory criteria.
Mhm.
All right, Amy, I think you are taking the process.
I was just reviewing the helpful handout to see, I know these are talking about the categories. So I was looking at the January 11th HRB hearing target date, and that is has the properties found eligible for association with persons. So that would be the date targeted to discuss those 28 properties. So are we on slide 16? I guess we are. So right now, as noted, working on these nomination memos for each resource. It's a page that would be appended to the existing study from 1997 to 2000. And we have these handouts, which you can find your address on here. I know a gentleman left, I believe, that said he didn't see his property on this list, and it might be because it's no longer eligible. So let's see. The nomination memos will be contained in the HRB packet as noted. We publish the packets a week before the HRB meeting. So when we say November 9th is our first meeting with these 68 properties, we're starting with a bang with lots of properties. And we will be publishing that packet, the staff report with all of the materials online, and giving those to the HRB. We will also be ahead of that, sending out letters to each of those property owners, the 68 owners, with information about their property and the recommendation. So again, hopefully we'll get that out by the end of this week. So you have more than a week. So we're going to be, I guess, move on to the next slide. So then we'll get to these HRB meetings.
Amy, can I interrupt just a sec? Sorry. But if somebody's computer's broken, can they come down to City Hall and get a copy of the information?
Yes, we're open at the Development Center Monday through Friday.
So would it be Development Center or the city clerk? Just go to the Development
City clerk
Center?
would not have this information.
Okay.
It would be somebody printing out from the webpage for them.
Okay.
I mean, they can do that at the library too, if they want to print something from the webpage.
Good idea.
Right?
Yeah. And if there's staff they can call if they have questions about anything, because
we have our contact on the webpage. If they're looking at the webpage for the project, it does have my name on there, and it has Isabel Castellanos' name as well, to send us.
But also on the notices, Isabel's name will be on the notice.
Yes.
And I do want to mention to this group and to the people in the audience for the Zoom meeting as well, that is part of the community outreach, reaching out to the individuals that are present here today to talk a bit more about in detail of what your property is, how the eligibility falls under those criterias, and providing these DPRs for your references. It was mentioned earlier that most likely it won't be mailed to each individual properties because of the extensive pages related to it. So we're also considering a sustainable approach to having these DPRs readily available, accessing it through the counter offices here in Palo Alto, and also communicating between Amy and myself. So that's part of the community outreach that we're providing for this group. And we can talk a little bit more towards the end of the conversation. But it's more of a communications, the properties are listed under these inventories. We're reaching out to you at various stages to provide an update. And there is that opportunity to communicate with us to hear what your thoughts are on the nomination and how you're feeling about moving forward. So that's something that we're continuing to provide to you during this whole process.
What about email?
Yes, through the emails, once you fill out the contact form on the project page, we will receive notice and we'll reach out to you directly. So that could be emphasized with a phone call or an email. We can also coordinate for a meeting if there's particular project related questions. So there is that planning detail and opportunity there. So those are all the different medias, but we're taking a sustainable approach, limiting the amount of printed materials, knowing that this is various pages related to each project, and willing to facilitate any technicals with the individual property owners.
So it's been great. We have had people reach out by email, and we've had conversations. We've been having some folks here met with us to talk through their project. So, you know, if you have a project in mind, we offer that service through the planning department to, you know, counsel on what is it that you're thinking of doing to your property as it relates to this, you know, existing, you know, eligibility versus, you know, actual listing and what the differences are. Yeah.
I'm just a little unclear on how are we gonna get a card in the mail with a link to the packet? Is that how it's gonna happen? Or?
Yes, you'll get a card in the mail or a letter. However, you know, we have however we plan to do that. I'm not sure if it's a card or a letter, but it will have where you can go. It's the same web page that we have for the project, but it'll get you to that upload.
What is the webpage?
It's on the card. Did you get the card to come?
That's the problem with cards.
Yeah. So yeah, so we have maybe we'll spend some time looking at the web page before you all leave, or you know, I can't rattle it off on my tongue. Sorry, it's not a bit.ly, right? It's a QR. Yeah, it's Reconnaissance. Yeah, yeah. Okay.
Yes, if I may recommend just going to the Palo Alto city website and putting in that search bar 2023 Reconnaissance Survey. There is also a link related and located within the historic resource board page, and we might be posting it as well through the city websites on potential hot topic items. So we are trying to reach out and be transparent on where the website information is, all the updates related to the project, and there will be continuous opportunities to reach out to us and communicate. So today is not the last meeting, but we'll continue to have the conversations, and the notices will be in advance to each hearing. So that's the normal process for any hearing board on mailing through property owners.
Oh,
So
yeah.
is this another meeting, HRD hearing November 9th?
So those that will be with the HRB looking at these properties that are listed on the handout that you're indicating. So if you find your address on that page, the front page here, then you will be receiving information. You'll be receiving a reminder, a notice about the first set there about that date. But yeah, mark your calendar. You can attend via Zoom or in person. We'll be in the council chambers. So just we want to get through the rest of the presentation so we can get to questions and answers. So, you know, at these ARB hearings, meetings, that we will be looking at all the nominations as indicated in this attached in the handout tonight. And then the plan is to bring the recommendations of the HRB together with the comments and input from the property owners to the city council for their consideration of nominating, of placing these properties on the local inventory as a category 1, 2, 3, or 4. So, and that we're looking at the spring, next spring of 2024. So we're hoping to get full participation of each owner to thoroughly review what they'll be looking at and comment. And so we can bring all of that, HRB can consider the input, and so can the council. So then let's see. So these are this is basically a summary of this handout, which is that we found that there are 68 properties that are eligible for architecture and events, 29 for architecture only, 9 for events only, and 28 for persons. And then we have a couple of other types of properties there. And then these are the dates for the HRB. We noted architecture and events is on November 9th. Architecture separately and events separately for December 14th. Then January 11th would be those 28 properties known for their persons, as well as the other categories, which are California registered properties, found more recently to be so. And there's 4 projects that are underway with construction that we're going to look at to see about eligibility. Just a side note that having construction on a historic property, they're still eligible unless the construction has completely, obliterated the facade or something. So anyways, let's see, I think we're at the Q&A. Yes.
And maybe we can start with the folks who are on
Zoom.
On Zoom. We have seen that you asked some questions, so we want to make sure that we get to you. So there's a question: is there a way to see the lists and the dates now? So for those who aren't here in the room, where we have some handouts, we're going to be posting that list to the city's website on the page for this project. Is it there yet, or will it be there tomorrow?
Yeah.
Okay, it'll be there tomorrow. And then it would be helpful to be able to read our home's DPR prior to the meeting. Email link online is fine. Yes, so the plan is that everyone will have an opportunity. We'll let you know when the information is available. You'll have at least a week to review the nomination form, the DPR form from circa 2001, or HRE, Historic Resource Evaluation, depending on whatever that earlier documentation was. So you can see the reason why it was originally found historically significant and the criteria and category for the Palo Alto inventory that we are recommending in this effort. So you'll be able to see all the information, and then you can provide comment ahead of time to through the information portal on the web page. You can attend the hearing, the HRB hearing, to provide verbal comment, either virtually or in person. And you'll also have an opportunity to do so at the city council hearings once it goes to them. So HRB provides a recommendation to the city council. City council makes the final decision about which properties are designated.
So is there information to all this data you collected where you can see your property down here that you can go and figure out why you have put it in that designation? And is that available now?
Is your property, it's on the second hearing list?
It's on.
Well, no,
And then turn on the
no, on the first list.
Oh, it's on the first one.
List.
Then it was previously identified.
You guys have done a lot of research.
Yeah.
And so I'm just curious what your criteria, what information that I don't know about my own property. Led you to believe that we were.
It's from that DPR form from 1997 to 2001. It's from the existing DPR form. And then whatever criteria it was found eligible under. If it's within that first property, it would have been A and C.
So is that detail available?
Are the DPRs available?
It was sent to me, I just want to say, I wrote in the note and I had your exact questions, why?
Yeah.
On what basis? And the person sent me the DPR.
We can send it to you. That's, I think, the takeaway. I don't know that they're available, just posted somewhere online.
Right, for the individual DPRs, for that detail that you request, we can send it per.
Should put the microphone close.
Thank you. So for that request for your individual DPRs, that's part of the outreach that we can provide it to you with an email or over phone call. That's something that is available to further explain the nomination and eligibility. Part of the package that will be presented in advance to the HRB meeting will have the description as part of the cover letter. So it's content that we're working on, and we're working to make that readily available for you. And this is occurring within the next couple of days in advance to the November 9th meeting. So I appreciate the responsiveness to look over your individual properties and details, and we are willing to facilitate that, knowing that the HRB meetings are coming in relatively quick for November and December, and we're working to make that available for you.
But I think if you want your DPR form as soon as possible, I think you could give us your address and your email and we can send that to you
What's
tomorrow.
it called, the DPR?
Yeah, it's a Department of Parks and Recreation. It's the official California format.
But that's the old one. not
That's the old
new.
DPR.
You're not giving anyone the new ones.
We'll give you
until-
the new ones once they're posted all together. Yeah, otherwise we'd have to send them out as they're available.
And this meeting of 68 potential homeowners.
You were jumping in with both feet in the biggest group of 68. So we're hoping that people will have a chance to read through the nomination memo. That is going to be a one-page memo that talks about the 1997 to 2000 DPR form that was done back then, and is proposing that this go forward because it's still eligible. So the owners will each be able to comment on that, express concerns. It can be during the hearing, it can be in writing. In fact, we're showing it. If you scroll down, this is the page we're talking about, the project, the Reconnaissance survey that you can do by pushing the search box. If you go down farther, you'll see there's a form at the bottom. This has links to look at things, and we'll be posting the packet here as well as on the HRB page. If you look at the bottom, there's the survey contact, and you can fill that out with your name and email or phone number if you choose, and request a call back, an email back, and we will send you the DPR. We'll send you whatever we've got already, and then you'll then, when it's published, see the memo that suggests which category.
I am just wondering, this is such a huge impact to each individual property owners. And from what you described, I think is fantastic. If city would reach out to every one of them instead of owners having to come forward and request it. I just don't know if the people might not be living in their homes or
Right.
maybe, for some reason didn't see the postcards or letter.
Yeah.
I am just thinking that maybe that is what
It's
you can do to help.
It's true that not everybody lives in their home, right? We have some owners that we're sending cards to that are not living in Palo Alto. So they're, they get the card in the mail like you get the card, but maybe they're living on the East Coast or somewhere else and it's remote for them. They don't think they want to participate. I don't know. I don't have their phone number. So we're just hoping they're looking at the cards.
Am I right in thinking that it's up to the HRB and then the city whether to go ahead with the designation, even if the property owner doesn't want it? Or has either the city or the HRB said they are not going to do that? Or is that something that's going to happen? Are they going to deliberate about that?
So this will be something that the reason we're at this juncture is because our ordinance, municipal code chapter 1649 doesn't specify, who can nominate. It says anyone can nominate a property. So nomination is no big deal. We've had that recently. A citizen in Palo Alto nominated a property that was not his property. So that can happen. But the decision point comes at the council. The council can receive the recommendations for nominations. They can receive protest letters from the property owners who don't want to be on the inventory and consider all of that and make a decision. The HRB will have conversations about this. So if people submit their letters, comments, concerns, that's an opportunity, each one of these HRB meetings, to talk about that.
Can they modify? I got a question. So Amy, I think earlier you said that the city council was gonna vote on these for 68 of them?
Well, that's just the first batch. There's more, there's 150. Yeah. So we haven't talked through how that will go as far as how many meetings before the council, how that will go. We're just at the first stage of this, which is to get before the HRB with the first batch. And we'll see if we can get through the first batch in the first meeting.
So my question again was, can the city council modify the recommendations that you presented?
They wouldn't modify the recommendation. They would either, say, yes, we agree, or they would say, oh, we don't agree. And yes, they could, instead of a category 1, we think this is a category 4. I mean, they don't have the expertise necessarily to do that. Sorry. But, but I guess is that what you mean about modify the recommendation?
Can they remove?
That's-
Yeah, it wouldn't be removed because it's not on the inventory. It would be, to say we're not going to place that property on the inventory.
That's within the power.
They could take the recommendation from the HRB. If, let's say, the HRB says you should put it on the inventory, council receives it and says, well, we don't think this should go on the inventory. And that's their decision. They're the decision maker. Yeah.
Could you give a quick summary of what happened in 97 to 2000? The citizens that was projected in 2001.
So I can give you a little bit of history on that. And that was the subject of, or it was part of the packet to the HRB last month. Was it last month? The very last meeting we had with the HRB, some historical materials. What happened back then was there was an interim ordinance and an interim process, and these list of eligible properties. There was also simultaneously a permanent ordinance, a new ordinance that the council adopted. It went through an environmental impact report. It went to Planning and Transportation Commission. It went to City Council. Council approved it. And then it was overturned by petition and vote. So that's what happened to that ordinance. It's not the same ordinance we have today. The one we have today is the same one that was in place before all of that happened. So that's what's still in place today. There's no proposed ordinance coming with all of these properties. Now, that's not to say that in the future, that ordinance, that could change in the future, but we don't have any proposal to make a change. But that if there were to be a change to the ordinance, the city's municipal code, it would have to go through a similar process, right? With environmental review, planning commission,
One of my concerns
council.
when I was at that last meeting is that the voters rejected this in 2001. You're moving forward with the process to designate those properties now for your historic registry.
Right.
And then you're going to address the code changes that either restrict or incentivize people to be on that registry. So we're making a decision before we know what the code is and what the incentives are. And many of the incentives that you've listed are, well, if the city chooses to do the Mills Act, but you haven't chosen to do the Mills Act.
Correct.
In fact, you
Correct.
rejected doing the Mills Act. So we can't expect relief on that kind of program. And so I don't really understand how we can make an informed decision as property owners as to whether there is any benefit or advantage to being designated historic on the historic registry. And if there's not, how can we avoid being designated? You're saying it's out of our control.
No, it's not out of,
choose whether they designate us or not. Even if we object, they still could choose to designate our property.
That's true. They still could choose. But I
don't think you've been open about that.
Right. Well, we don't suspect that the council would designate a property to the inventory, over the objections of the property owner. And the reason I say this is because the state of California has a similar process, which we covered at the last meeting. I think I covered it in the conversation, that if a property owner objects to being listed on the California register, then the state will not place it on the state register.
That was actually going to be one of my points. Neither the National Registry nor the California Registry
Right.
will do that over the objection of the property owner. So
Right.
I'd like to, have some assurances as a Palo Alto property owner that won't happen for the city registry.
Well, I'm not the city council, but I like I say, I suspect that they will look to what the state does and what the federal government does. But also what I'll say is that, with the current ordinance, there is quite a wide leeway of what, some properties that are on the register need to go to the Historic Resources Board and be reviewed, and there are recommendations. But when the pedal comes to the metal and you go to the development center, those are voluntary suggestions, if you will. And so people don't really know that so much. You know, we'd rather people follow the recommendations, but the way our ordinance is currently written, it's not really effective in for historic preservation. But it does set up a process. Okay, we're having more, and I'm wondering if we want to turn on one of those microphone so we can hear.
Yeah, so to follow on the question previously, so if I want to choose by myself to withdraw from the nomination, would it then be at the HRB hearing to voice my concern that I would like to be withdrawn?
I think that would be the first and earliest opportunity after having seen what the proposal is.
Okay.
So you mentioned when you go down, so I had a neighbor and they looked up on their parcel map and there said property designated as actually as eligible in 1997 or something, potentially eligible. And they weren't on this list. And I told them, I think for whatever reason, some people who were in that category weren't designated. And I guess part of my confusion is, and maybe it has to do with national and local, but you know, there's a lot of properties in Palo Alto that at least under the description I saw in mine meet the exact same terms. And I'm just confused as to how one determines, like, is there a goal to say, well, you know, Shakespeare wrote a lot of great plays and we're not going to put every Shakespeare on. And how do you know whether you're putting, probably never heard of Pericles, Prince of Tyre, but he wrote half of it and it's really not a great play. And, you know, how do you say whether, well, we're saying this is an example and someone says, really, that or Macbeth? So is there a goal to have like any kind of overall, when we look at what's on the inventory and we're trying to fill in the gaps, like some of these
That's not what's happening. What's happening is, again, we're just taking what already was done back in 1997 that kind of got to a point and determined eligible, which again, we're doing with the same properties. We still determine them eligible, or there's been a number of them that have been cut loose because, right?
You're saying this person, that friend of mine that went and checked on the parcel map on hers.
That's potentially eligible, which is different from eligible. And I know it's confusing. Potentially eligible was a broader list of properties that was a windshield survey. And those did not move forward in the process like the ones that were determined eligible back in 1997. Those properties remain on the potentially eligible because they are older than they were built before 1948. And there was no further study of them. That's why they say potentially eligible.
Okay, I wanted to build on.
I'm so sorry. Okay, go.
Oh, she's had her hand.
To build on her comment, it's another example. A neighbor called me to come to this meeting. He has a plat. This is 1896, and he's not on the inventory list. He's not on the 1997-2000 eligible survey. He's not part of the reconnaissance survey. His family is the original homeowners. And they have not made any changes. And he's not even deemed eligible, anything.
Right.
He's not even on the radar. Why is that? And I'm only asking because I'm supposed to be an example of middle class home. And he's gotta be a middle class home because he's right near me.
Right. So I don't know why his home was passed. Okay, first of all, the plaque. The plaque is given out for any home that is over 100 years old. Doesn't matter if it's a great example of a certain style or a poor example of a certain style. So that's the plaque. So that's given out by past, not the city. The second piece of that is, you know, why did Dames and Moore, which was the prior consultant, not identify that as eligible? And I don't know. It might have, so it was never, you're telling me it was never on the potentially eligible list either. And was there a lot of vegetation there that they couldn't see it when they drove by that first time in 1997? That's a possibility.
I'll tell you why it's no. There are houses that say that on the parcel report that it's, or whatever your report is, it said could not determine because could not be from the street. This person didn't even make it, you know what I mean, on the list to be looked at so that comment would be made.
Right.
He's just fascinating that, well, it's the original owners. I think that's even more distinctive.
Right.
He knows the entire history of the house. which is no building.
Well, we would love to talk to him.
Yes, me too. Not give the address. then.
Okay.
Like, I'll be honest, I went around my neighborhood with 3-4 people and I said, which houses are these reading criteria that you think? No kidding, the houses that, you know, the 2 that are on the 2-block area were not there, but there were like 5 that they said that one. And I won't give those people's addresses either, but if that's what makes you wonder, it's kind of like I said, is Macbeth not being on there? It makes you wonder about the list, but that's it for another day. Just, you answered my question, and that is that there's some other list where they were potential and they were, these people probably were potential and they were dropped. Okay.
Right, but they still show on the parcel report as potentially eligible. Again, because they never made it to the eligible, they weren't studied, there was a bush in the way, and so they couldn't see the whole building, and that forever is potentially eligible, and we're not doing anything about those at this time because we're only dealing with the eligible.
Didn't have the question, but I wonder how come that's more attractive. Okay, but now you've explained it. It could be there's something anyway.
But more importantly, for someone like us, when we see that there are others that seem to be close to our equals, not designated, and we are the select on our block, then you get some, I guess, zoning inconsistency going on where everyone else on our block won't be designated. We'll be that little house and up because these other people might be bought out. So what I'm thinking is it's very unfortunate that it's a select list that doesn't fully collect everyone, because it makes people like us go, that this is not a good situation for us, even though we both love historic homes. We picked a historic home. I'm a historian. I studied history. I'm a genealogist. I love American homes. I love my town. I don't want the town destroyed by developers either. At the same time, I don't want to be disadvantaged in an extreme way to protect the town for everyone else's sake. And I feel like the city is not really giving us great incentives. I read the incentive list carefully. I know you still want to go over that. So I'm just saying, from the homeowner's perspective, I hope you understand that many of us want to participate, but we don't want to officially participate.
Understood.
I want to inject my personal feelings about preservation. And I'm glad that my house did not get demolished right before I bought it. And it was on the list. There were developers looking at it and they were going to take the house down and put 2 houses up. And I'm really grateful that it survived. And I have my husband's office is a little building downtown. It's, the fact that it's standing is miraculous. It's next to the bowling alley on Emerson, if you know where the Indian lanes were. But I'm really glad that it had a life that allowed it to come into my hands. And it's the one property that my kids would like to hold on to. It's there's something about old houses. Yes, we love them, but our property market is so bizarre right now and so competitive that, somebody who is not looking for an old house could buy a house that's not protected, which none of us are. But I didn't say that. But yeah, but I think there is an advantage to maintain these properties that we love. And if anybody can buy it and their motivation is just land, then those houses that have so much soul will be gone. So I think that we are all preservationists. Most of us who live in old houses are preservationists at heart. And I think it is unfortunate that there's so much fear associated with being on this list, which is pretty benign. But hopefully we'll all do our therapy and work it out and we'll get through it.
So I think we had a number. We'll start here first, second, third, if
And
that's
then do
okay.
you want to move to the rest of the
Yeah,
presentation after the 3?
We have the,
and then
we
we'll
have
have another
4,
Q&A.
1, 2. So, okay.
We're kind of on the other side of the spectrum. For those that are on the list and want to take advantage of the benefits and entitlements and incentives.
Why don't you use the microphone?
There you go.
Thanks. So if we want to take advantage of the benefits and incentives. And how would the timing work in the sense that if it's a project that's a house that's planning a project and they want to take advantage of those incentives and it's nominated and it's moving forward and by all practical purposes, it's going to be put on the list. Can it be done concurrently? Can those incentives be realized or incorporated into the work concurrently while it's being approved or going through HRB? How will that review work? How will that particular?
Well, just not to get too specific, but do you see this property on the first list?
It would be January 11th.
Oh. Okay.
Very
So the easier if it was on the first meeting. To say what to do. I mean, of course, we haven't thought of this. What to do if somebody is super eager to be on the inventory. I mean, we do have a nomination. We do have the ability to put properties on by request of the owner to nominate their own property. And bring that forward specifically. I don't know. We don't
know how long
about that, but
planning process will work, but it's certainly we're going through that process and working it in. Can we plan these incentives in is the main question.
I think it's a pretty good bet for you to, if you want to be on the register, that council will grant your wish. Is what I would say. I don't know what category you are, but it's probably we'll see. Yeah, persons something. Okay, so it's high likelihood if you want to be on the inventory, the council will say yes to that because we want people that want to preserve their homes, right? So you can start with your ideas on your architectural drawings and bring it in. We'll start talking about that. Yeah, and get you going.
Can you clarify the relationship between SB 5 and the designation? SB 5 is the state bill that pretty much nullifies all local zoning rules.
SB9.
SB9 was a 9.
Well, so there's SB9, which enables lot splits of single family residential property and provision of up to 4 homes on a single family residential property by way of lot split and a primary unit and ADU on each duplex.
So what's the relationship between those provisions and what you say are the benefits that somewhat being in this designation list would protect you from that?
So
if been tested, is there an exception?
So if you wanted to do an SB9, if you are single family zoned property and you have started down the path of doing an SB9 project and that's your goal, we're not going to stop you from that. If you file tomorrow with the development center for an SB9 property, even though you're eligible, right? But so the other way around is if you wanted to, right now, the only lot split incentive, if that's the part of SB9 that you're interested in. So we have two parts of SB9. Some people use SB9 to avoid the individual review process and do a second unit on their property and just have it be a building permit only. That's one way people use SB9. But the other way is to split a lot. So we do have a provision right now for a lot split of a historic property, but it's if you have a historic home that's on the inventory, which none of your homes are because they're on just eligible. But if it's actually on the inventory, there's you can do a flag lot in an R1 zone. It's a little bit complicated to go over tonight, but if that's your interest, I'm happy to talk with you about that.
It's not mine, but any subsequent owner of my place, I'm just curious whether that would create a disincentive of a potential buyer.
Yes, if somebody comes along and they want to subdivide the lot that you have, and it's, let's say, 10,000 square feet, yeah, let's say if it's 10,000 square feet, the likelihood that they can come along and do a lot split is pretty high because of SB 9,
Okay.
certainly right now. But if it was on the list for historic, SB 9 would not, does not, historic properties are exempt from SB 9 state law. So you wouldn't be able to do an SB 9 project.
All right. Well,
Right.
one last thing, you had a great slide up at the beginning that showed the benefits and the risks and so forth. I'd love to see that again, or a copy of it, if you can make it available on
next slide.
some type of.
And SB 9 only applies to R1s, right?
Yeah, well, R1s
It's just
or
in the slide.
yeah, R1 zones or RE, which is also single family. It does not apply to R2 zones. It does not apply to RMD, which is also multifamily, or R2. So if you are any of those zones, SB 9, you can't use SB 9 to do the project.
There are a lot of RMD, R2s on this historic list. And I'd just like to say that if the city's goal is to stop SB 9 going overboard, then this is not the best list to use.
Right. No, I don't think it's our goal to stop SB 9. In fact, we need to embrace SB 9 because it's a state law that we can really not push back against at this point. But we are, so we stand ready with ministerial process for SB 9s. So this is the reason it's connected to SB 9 is I think that was a catalyst to, again, call attention to the fact that we have these properties sitting out there as eligible. But yes, there are quite a few that are not R1 zoned.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, we had an order. Yeah, sorry. I'm not a very good moderator. Who is?
Well, I just have a request. I'm pretty confident there are many property owners that are not interested in being on it. And just to, I don't really want to go to a meeting in a couple of weeks to be upset about the possibility of my property being nominated. Like at least the HRB and the council to discuss in advance what they're willing to do. And if they're not willing to fight against the homeowner, to just tell us. And so that we can just easily say we're not interested and have that be that. And it's crazy that we're in the situation we're in right now, talking about this. So you should have worked it out in advance, what you were willing to do. But here we are, sitting here, and you don't know.
It's because I'm not the city council.
I know.
Can we go to the city council and ask them the process?
So you would prefer to cut this whole process out and not move forward with this nomination process with careful looking at each property. You'd rather just say we don't want anything nominated, or
I'm confident I'm not the only person that would just like to drop out now and we all move on.
Well, I would ask that do you know if you're on the first list? Are you on the first list? Your property? So you soon will be getting something in the mail that helps you to understand what it is. At that point, you can write a letter, do what you need to express yourself about the results. We haven't sent you the results yet.
In other
So
words, just say that he doesn't want to be on the list, or that he doesn't want his house to be.
that's absolutely something anyone can do.
Yeah.
But we just ask that you receive the work that's been done, because we've been at it for a bit, and we're ready, at the point with at least the first 68 to get those letters out so that you can have a final think. I suppose if you're against it from the start, I understand that, but this will be information.
Amy, to be clear, does the homeowner, would writing a letter or using the form online or an email be sufficient to say, I request the council and HRB to remove my home from this list. I do not want to be included in the process. Or do they need to physically come to council chambers for the HRB meeting and city council meeting?
They do not need to, nobody needs
Great.
to physically be anywhere.
A
at
letter
any hearing.
is sufficient.
Correct.
We will understand your wishes to be removed if a letter comes through, and that will be considered in each of these meetings individually for that address.
Right. In fact, if you know, without even looking at the letter, as you seem to, that you just want to send the letter tomorrow, then send the letter tomorrow, if that's your wish.
So you're looking for a letter?
If you would like to send a letter at any point, you may send a letter.
To council or to?
No, for this process, we have this form, but you could certainly send it to.
Action is to.
If I may,
They're not quite ready to receive a bunch of letters right now because.
I think it's
yeah.
a governance question. I mean, I think it is, I'm gonna interpret, but this is a very painful process. We all have spent hours going through documents, going through the benefits, discussing the benefits and see if we understand the benefits. Is that a benefit? Is that a benefit to you? Would you use it? So many of us have invested hours respecting what's on your website. You know, we said it wasn't clear, went back, we all set up, several of us have got our DPR forms, etc. And it's painful.
Sure, yeah, you're in pain.
So the question is, if you know in advance what the governance process is, this isn't pointing at anybody. It's saying what is the decision-making process? Is it unknown or do?
No, it's known. It's known.
But no, the question is, does council already know that they would support an owner and not over?
We have not asked them directly this question. However, I understand that. However, what I'm suggesting is that this very first November 9th, your letter will be in the packet saying, no, thank you. And the HRB will be looking at each property and see, no, thank you for yours. And you've done what you need to do. And it, you know, you can express yourself.
Amy.
HRB can still say, you know, your property is so special that we're willing to override the wishes. That's what I'm getting at.
How many people on
that
the board?
it's not gonna, that's clear
How
to
many people
communicate
on the
whether or
council?
not that's gonna go forward.
There's 7 members on the council and
You know,
one
if
of them is here.
Seven-member council, there's surely 4 of those people are gonna say, respect your wishes. Not just a concerned citizen.
Yeah. Yeah. So in closing, when can you send a letter? Now. Who do you send it to? Amy French or Isabella Castellano? You know, email. It all works. You know, if you don't have to send it certified, but you know, if you send an email, I will respond back. I've received your letter. Thank you very much. We'll put this in the packet. And so when the HRB receives their packet, they will see your letter. That's what I can guarantee.
Okay.
Thank you. My name's John Kelly. I really would like to associate myself with the remarks of this gentleman. Sorry, I don't know your name. And I think it's ironic that we're here talking about history and I guess we're with the HRB. And what I found missing from your initial presentation when you were laying out the history of this process is something to me that speaks precisely to the point that you're raising. And that is that in the period roughly, I think it's 1997 to 2000, there was a very, very, very divisive set of, you know, there was a series of campaigns, there was a divisive process that happened in Palo Alto. And sometimes we talk about what creates divisiveness. And I think people just don't realize the history there, because at that time, the council started with a list of, I think it's about 2,000 properties. And they eventually whittled it down to about 700 that they were going to designate. And they changed the ordinance. They changed the ordinance in 2000. And you have that in the staff report, but I didn't see it in your slides. And so when that changed, the whole process changed. And people were outraged. There was a homeowners group that got organized. There were 700 people that said, we can't have this. We don't want this. And there was a battle. There was a referendum. And at the end of the referendum, the community decided in a plebiscite, essentially, that we wanted to maintain an owner application requirement. And what I'm having a hard time figuring out is that at the moment that the COVID pandemic was breaking out, I think there was an ordinance that was adopted it was introduced, I believe, on March 17th, 2000.
And I think it was finalized on April 6th, 2020. So right when everyone's going into the lockdown, that's the most, and I don't, maybe it changed earlier, but as far as I know, that's the most recent change to the ordinance. I can look up the municipal code number if you want. It was passed unanimously.
Sorry. Which ordinance are you speaking of, if you don't mind me interrupting you? Are you talking about chapter 1649 of the municipal code? We have not made changes to that code.
I can look it up. I've got a copy of the ordinance. I think I can give you a cite to the ordinance. The ordinance right now shows that the last amendment was during COVID. So maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that wasn't the thing. But there's some point in time, which is inexplicable to me, between 2000 and 2020, where the owner application requirement seems to have disappeared.
Okay, it's possible you're referring to the ordinance that council passed in June of 20. There were 4 meetings in June of 2001 or 2000, and that was the one that got referended. That ordinance that council passed back then said it's the owner that comes forward with their own nomination. That ordinance went away because of the referendum. So what was left was the ordinance that was in place before that from the 1980s. That's the one we have today.
Let me state it this way. What this community needs is what I believe we have at the federal level and what I believe we have at the state level, and I'm certain we have in the military. And that is, if you want the historic designation, you got to ask for it. And it can't be imposed without your consent. It can't be imposed without your application. So when you're talking about the situation that's presented here, you can say, well, sure, there are always going to be 4 members of the council who will respect your wishes. But if that's true, then why don't we memorialize that in the municipal code?
Certainly, that's an action that the council can direct the modification of the ordinance to say exactly what like the state does or what the feds do, which is not over the objection of the property owner. The ordinance doesn't say it right now.
That is, if you want to be on the National Historic Registry, you got to ask for it. You want the state registry, you have to ask for it. You want a Mills Act treatment,
You can't object. Oh, sorry.
National Register can't, property can't be listed on the National Register over the objection of the owner.
That's,
There's a little bit of a nuance there, but.
That's a nice nuance.
Right.
Fine, I'd be happy with that. I think a lot of people in the community, but what we don't have right, if you're soliciting public feedback, I would like to offer my public feedback. I think there should either be an owner application requirement, because what we've got right now, it's any person or group, as I understand it, can ask for a property to be designated historic. If I don't like, for example, I wouldn't do this, I think it'd be acting in bad faith, but if I didn't like somebody developing a property down the street, I can, just send in the paperwork, start the process.
Well,
if somebody wants to investigate it, I can stop the development of one of my neighbors.
Right. We know that's a slippery slope, and it is a cost to submit an application. We haven't received applications except very recently for the cannery site. That's the only one I'm aware of that we've received from somebody else. So what I'd say is, the ordinance, we know that the ordinance doesn't say everything that it should say. So we know that already, including what happens if an owner objects to listing. We also know that this process right now is free for the people that want to be on the city's register and take advantage of the extra 250 square feet of floor area that they can get because just being on the register, let's say. And so we're making it easy for those people that want to be on the register to move forward without having to compile their own paperwork, pay an application fee. That's a lot of application fees that we're passing by if there's people actually on this list that want to be moving forward.
One thing about the advantages, just because I think that's why I wanted to have this meeting, that it says on the city site, you can get something like connected with historic people to talk to. But in your presentation, you said you can get free consultation. So is it, if you get on the list, someone will talk to you without your having to hire them? Or is that correct?
So the process we have in our city is that if you have a category 1, 2, or 3, or 4, and you come in and you want to make changes to the exterior, we provide free consultation from our historic preservation consultants. So they're looking at the property, giving recommendations on how to, adjust the wall just so you can see where the historic piece was and where the new piece was. And it's, to the trained eye, you'll see where the changes, that kind of thing, or,
Great if the city would do that no matter what, just to encourage people, period.
Yeah, we don't have unlimited money to work on all the houses in Palo Alto for free, but
Based on the front of the house, or once you designated as if the whole house in the rear.
There is typically more flexibility towards the rear. So there is a bit of a focus on what you can see from the kind of public right of way, which could include side facades, and it depends on the property.
Like it's designated, like I said, there still comes back to this, kind of confusion about what makes a house designated. So it's designated just based on the front of the house, but once it's designated, it applies to the front and rear.
It's the whole house. The whole house is designated. The whole house is designated, but.
It's just the external.
Yeah, so the exterior of the sorry, I don't know, I'm jumping in, but the exterior of the property is where, is where the city would get involved in looking at what's proposed. We wouldn't look at what's proposed if you're doing anything on the inside, that we don't even go and look at any of those, but we get professional help and we don't charge the customer to look at the exterior changes that appear to be significant. So, if you're choosing to put something on the front of your house and it's on our inventory, it will no longer be on the inventory after you put something on the front of the house that obliterates the front of the house. But if you're sensitively doing something at the rear or side and it is compatible with that home, it's likely to still be eligible for the inventory and the benefits therein.
Good Q&A. Are we done?
No, we're not done.
Thank you. I actually just wanted to bring up something. It has not been discussed oftentimes in official meetings, and that is money. So we had somebody who just completely loved old homes, like you said. It was a beautiful home, and it's Category 4. So he fell in love with it, and then he bought a house. He bought a house at a bargain because not everybody has the means to maintain an older home, really. So I bought a house in 2019, and on my way here, I stopped by his house to see what's going on. So 2019, we are almost at the end of 2023, so that is 4 years later. He is now about to do the painting, and the house is not done. So you think about it, if you buy a house and you spend 4 years doing the work, think about the old queen in England. Her taxpayers co-pay the maintenance of her palace. It is very, very expensive, and I think we need to remember a property is a home. It's not a museum. And that's why I think it's very democratic for people who think that the home is so valuable to be nominated and elevated to be historic significance. And yet I also think once the designation is there has to be a sunset clause, because we oftentimes forget our wonderful U.S. Postal Office is magnificent. It's going to be there because our federal government, I think our federal government owns it, right? And it'll always be there. They are not going to change hands tomorrow, next year, or next month. So the next owner comes in, will do different things and all that. But it is very different because our homes are our homes. I don't know how many of you have lived in multiple homes, but I definitely remember after we bought our first home, the first thing I thought was, I no longer need to ask my landlord, can I put a picture on the wall? And that is the pride of ownership, right? And that's all what we want, to own our home. And suddenly we have to ask permission. Can I change the window and all that? So I just think that to remember our homes, really, it involves money because older homes are really expensive to maintain and not everybody has the means. And by all means, it is very important that we have different variety. And I think that is why our Palo Alto is just so attractive to so many people, because people coming here and say, oh, there are so many different varieties. And you have a newer and older homes coexisting. But just think about that. A few of them say, I promise my neighbor I will not give out their address. That should speak volumes. Thank you.
I think.
Yeah. Quickly, does the HRB have to vote about these things on the 11th? Because it seems to me like this is just premature. Like there's the question of the owner veto, which should be visited before talking to owners about like their properties. There's also in your last meeting, you talked about changing the incentives and changing the categories and things. And it seems like you should do that before adding a whole bunch more things in it. And there's also, you talked in the last meeting about you need more clarity on like what counts as a historic person, what counts as a historic event. You know, shouldn't you have that discussion? Say, okay, this is what we're going to count as a historic event. This is what we're going to count as somebody who's historic. You know, define that properly. And then look at the houses. So what's the rush? Why can't you like put this on hold, make those decisions, then come back and look at the houses in the light of that? And then homeowners will have like right now, I have no clue what your criteria are about persons, which is what my house is coming in under. How do I even talk to you about that? And when are you going to have that discussion? Like after you've looked at my house, or it seems like you're putting the cart before the horse here.
So, have you seen the DPR form for your home? Okay, so you know what it says about persons.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's not
completely bizarre.
Okay, so it's not a mystery to you because you've seen the DPR.
Why you think this guy's important?
Well, we didn't.
Well, why he was deemed important
In 2000. Yeah.
There are other people who live down on the same street who are equally as interesting and important. So
I think that is it January 11th? I think that's going to be a very interesting meeting with 20.
Why not have the discussion and then look at the buildings and see if they meet the criteria, and then invite people in to see if they agree or not. It seems like you're really putting this the wrong way around.
Well, I think we know that there's a number of people that are just going to say no matter what they read, right? That just don't. So, I mean, I guess that's just being brutally honest. So we may have 27 letters like the gentleman back here saying, no, thank you. And we'll know what we're going to bring to the HRB at that point.
Well, now that's assuming that the HRB is okay with the idea of going against someone's wishes, but that's not decided at all. That's something that was one of my points. Is that
because nothing's decided at this point.
Yeah, so you should decide all that first, then have these meetings.
Yeah, I think one clarifying question to the HRB is, will you be making your recommendations from the historical perspective and the criteria, or will you also be taking into account the opinion of the household? I think it's a fair question. Are you good? I'm not asking how you're going to vote. I'm just saying, are you looking at both factors, just historical or historical? And I want to listen.
I want to know
there's
that.
a reason.
I want to know that before we go
why
to
to
meeting.
come. You know what I mean?
We're gonna, we will be taking the owner's opinion into consideration. But we're hoping, on the other hand, that you all do take the time to read the information that's available about your houses and at least contemplate what the advantages might be. And if there really are negatives to this, and I know we've talked about resale value, and I think that's a slippery slope. Some of the guys in town who could buy anything they want have category 1s and 2 houses. So, there's pride of ownership. And if that's a factor, I think that, we will be open-minded and we are advisory. So I'm sure that we're all learning as we go along, and we have not seen all the information on these houses. So we don't have quite as much background as you do individually. I know how I feel about the ones I've seen. I don't know how I feel about the ones I haven't seen. So I think it might depend on the houses, and we felt it was really, really important to have it on our inventory, and there aren't really negatives. I think we might advise council to go for it. And if we don't really see much value in adding it to our inventory, and it's, you know, this another house as far as we're concerned, and the owner doesn't want it, then I think that we'll listen to the owner. So I think that we need to give the process time. I know I have been incredibly impatient about this whole thing. It's been a long time in coming, and I apologize, although I had no control, because it would have been happening a lot faster if I did. But, you know, I think that it's only 2 weeks, you know, for most of these, well, half these houses. So we'll know soon.
You know, I do have to make this comment that it feels like, I think Amy said, there's a pretty good chance, maybe even definitely, that if we don't want to be on it, we're not going to have to be on it. And if that really is the case, if you are really sure of that, it feels like a lot of resources have been wasted on a lot of people who are adamantly opposed no matter what. And those resources could have gone to promoting to the people who said, hey, actually, I do want to learn more. I want to understand what that 250 square feet is about. I do know neighbors that are on this list that said, yeah, I'm kind of interested. And if they had been the targets, people who were ambivalent or slightly interested have been the targets, then I think your resources would have gone better for them, don't you? Unless you really are going to have the legal power to tell people they have to be on it. And that I don't think is clear yet.
Well, you know, we have Palo Alto Way, and we have to analyze it first. So we're there. And hopefully at least some of the people will be open-minded enough to consider what it really means to join the inventory.
That's very unfair. I'm sorry, you can't characterize like that. I mean, that people have all kinds of reasons for not wanting to be on this.
I really don't see them, but you know, but you can tell me what they are, but I personally am blind to them. Sorry.
But I also do think it's important, like, you know, for this meeting, we are trying to describe the incentives for people. We did get the feedback that people weren't necessarily aware of the potential incentives or what they could be used for. So that is something we were trying to address as part of this meeting.
That now still?
Well,
We've run out of
I mean,
time to do a very good job of it, but we understand that your opinions and your concerns are more important than us getting the information out in a setting like this. So certainly those of you who are decided you don't want to move forward, please send your letters in. If you would like to have a moment to talk about what it means after you get the paperwork, and call me and email me, and we can set up meetings where we can walk through so you understand what the incentives are as they apply to your home in particular.
I also would be very interested in what you think incentives that might work would be. I think I would be very interested in your thoughts in what incentives would be appropriate to motivate people who would be leaning that way. Really, nobody's here to take your property rights away from you. We understand there's an issue here. That's why we're listening to you. And I understand this could have been done in a perfect world in a much more logical and reasonable way than it may have been done. I can't speak to what happened in the mid-90s, but this is where we are, and we're trying to work through it. And you should express your opinion early and often, but I, for one, would really like to hear what would be real for you in terms of getting you to consider to put your house on one of these inventories.
I'm going to give a little example. You know, I'm not this polar thing. I put solar panels on the front of my house because that's where the sun is. You know, Palo Alto, we have all these trees, and you can put the solar panels anywhere you want. They analyze it and they tell you it's the front of the house. Well, the front of the house is really not a historical thing that I'm supposed to be doing. Okay, so the fear, something like that, I'm not tearing down the house, that's not really historical. So there isn't a lot of flexibility. If there was an enforcement that I had to do that, I would not be able to do solar. It wouldn't be beneficial to my house. So I'm an eco person, and the historical guidelines are not modernized. And I'm only giving this examples because I'm trying to say I'm not against historical, but I can't live in the 18th century alone. I mean, there's evolution. And these are an example of a concern that I'm raising to you, that it's not progressive enough for some reasonable things on a house.
I think we're hearing that pretty clearly tonight. And I don't think any of us have any problem listening to what you have to say.
But it's still not allowed.
I'm glad that you did raise the question. Each and every one of us, I myself included, like bought this house because it's an absolutely gorgeous, beautiful house and we want to preserve its history. Fundamentally, the question of are the incentives aligned to motivate me to want to participate into the program? Right? And I'm going through the list, and that's what I was asking the question around the federal tax credits. I'm like, well, does it apply? Does it not apply? It doesn't really apply, or like, I don't know. And it doesn't feel like it aligns to me. But what's my motivation to want to? Look, I've got really old windows.
Yes.
And like, they're literally ropes, like this old school. You ask for an incentive, you ask like, what would incentives be? Well, if the objective is to maintain the home, to preserve the home, perhaps there are tax credits, perhaps there are credits that can be provided if I'm going to be paying and updating and upkeeping the home. Expanding my house, I'm pretty happy with the size of the home, so that's not alignment. So I think it is valuable for you to reach out to homeowners to understand what are the incentives to be aligned. Because what you want to see happen is all of us raising our hand and saying, I want in. The conversations you're having here is, I want out. Which means that we're not aligned here in this conversation. But we all started out buying this house because we love it. We really value, we're all homeowners that value and want to preserve this home. If we didn't want to preserve this home, each of us would have knocked down the house, right?
Yes.
Right?
One of the incentives, which I think you've probably gone through, is the Mills Act, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe there are two things about the Mills Act that are important for everybody. One is it's owner application. The second is, I think it's time.
10 years.
I think it's 10 years and it's renewable. So one of the, if you're looking for concrete, financial things to make people maintain the historicity of their homes, that's a pretty good way to do it. It comes it's more complicated from the city's point of view. It's more complicated. There's state allocations, I think. And you have to apply for it. As far as I know, Palo Alto doesn't have it now, but that would actually be putting some money on the table. And with regard to the sale issue, the 10-year renewal process means that if a new owner doesn't want to renew the Mills Act designation, they don't have to.
I would.
You're correct, we do not have one.
Before I decide whether I want to be on the list. That's basic. So I want you guys to do the work, come up with, have these conversations, come up with a new set of incentives that are aligned. So we're all going, yes, please, I want to be in. And then I want to make the decision. Prior to that, I'm leaning, no, I mean, exactly the same thing. I love my house. It's beautiful. It's old, it's wonderful. But I'm scared of you guys taking money from me because that's my retirement potentially. If I need to leave, and that's, and we have anecdotally realtors are saying,
money from you?
Yeah, because if I that's my house is like my retirement. So I have potentially that's how I could fund my retirement, is by selling and moving somewhere.
Well, how are they gonna take money from you?
Because by having the designation as historic, it's realtors are telling everybody, oh, this house is great because it's not historic, and people are paying less. So it's and that's an unquantifiable.
I can back you out on that.
Yeah, yes. Thank you. Yeah, but I mean, it's if that is in the air, then not only are our incentives not aligned, there's also the community has this program has a reputation of being a taking of value from property tax, and I think I would like you guys to fix that, and then come to us and say, do you want to be on the register? And if you do fix it with a Mills Act or whatever, I'd probably say totally. But right now, I'm not prepared to say yeah.
Appreciate your comments. I think one of the things that I have learned in my not even year on the HRB so far is these projects take place sometimes in what would appear to be an out of order way. And the reason for that is because of city priorities and city grants and money. So like we said, this has been going on since 1997 to 2001. It's now 22 years later. So we haven't rushed this process through, unfortunately. It is coming to the fore now. And for the multitude of property owners that are not engaged in this process, and who knows, maybe have no problem being nominated, we will move forward with their houses having this historical designation, because that is the time and the process where we are now. Absolutely, it is one of the goals of the Historic Resources Board to address the ordinance. It is something we have talked about at great length and done study sessions on. We realize the incentives are not as compelling as they could be. All of this is true. This is the position that we are at now that has taken 22 years of work to get to. If you are an advocate for historic preservation within our community, yes, take your home off the list until you are comfortable with it being there because of the incentives. For the rest of the 150 owners, we will move forward with this process. Like the California Register and like the National Register, if you would like your home to be delisted, you are able to do so.
That's not what you said.
Yeah.
No, you absolutely not said that.
I've heard that before. I've
It
heard
all
it in
depends
this
on
room
who-
today.
If your property is registered, there currently is no ordinance that addresses what happens if it is registered and you don't want it to be. That said, as a member of the Historic Resources Board, I would be remiss if I did not take the owner's wishes into consideration upon my vote for that specific property. We are members of the community. Not all of us are actually privileged enough to be homeowners in this community. So if you are, congratulations. We will advocate for the homes that we see have historic merit, and we will do our civic duty in that way.
Is that your opinion, or is that the opinion of the board? Because we're hearing different things.
My opinion as vice chair is I will take into consideration each property, including any good, bad, or otherwise comment from the owner, and I will make my vote on that property as an individual on the board.
Thank you.
I'd like to speak.
One more time.
I'd like to speak from experience working with people with historic homes and that want to preserve them. And a lot of times the incentives are really buried in the ordinances and the codes. It's really somewhat hard to kind of interpret what those might be and how they might benefit you. But some examples might be you aren't listed, you don't have a historic home. It's a historic home, but it's not listed. And you do some remodeling in your house, and the building officials say, that stairway, that railing has to now be 42 inches high. Well, that doesn't really fit in my historic home. I'm sorry, that's the code. It's not going to look, it's not going to look right. Or a lot of times people think they can't replace their wood windows with something that looks historic, and it's mostly about appearance. And so there's ways to upgrade your home in a way that fit within the confines of the historic building code and the Secretary of Interior standards, which kind of give guidelines on how to do work. And so I think a lot of times they're just fears that are really unfounded. And so in my experience, all the historic homes that have ever been restored have always retained, if not exceeded, in the value of neighboring homes by virtue of the care and I guess I should say the attention that it's gotten from the owners. And so I would just ask you to, I'm not here for the city or anything. I'm just listening to everyone talk through these. And a lot of these are comments I hear all the time, and I have to kind of talk through the process with owners and reassure them that if you want to put solar panels on your house, you can do that. If things are removable, you can do that. If something is reversible, you can do that. if you want to do some things, treatments to your windows that don't. I mean, if you want to take a Victorian and turn it into a modern house, well, yeah, it's not for you, but most of you live in homes that are traditional and historic for a reason. You love the character, you're there for a reason. And so things like a high step stair, things that you kind of put up with and live with, they're there for, you've kind of learned to just accept them. But those might be things that you would have to change out because they don't meet the current code. Whereas with the historic building code, you're allowed then to keep those things that are part of the character of the house and work within a lot of free parameters that just give you a lot of flexibility. And so before you make that decision, you actually might be acting counter to what what's in your best interest. So I would just encourage you to think a little bit more about what your preconceived notions about what's going to happen, and be a little bit more open to the possibility of what it could be and the benefits that it could provide for you. So I just needed to say that because I'm hearing these things and I just know them to not be really correct assumptions. So anyway, that's all I have to say.
You're great. Could we have you on the HRB as the liaison?
Thank you for bringing that up. We actually have elections coming up this spring. So if you would like to be on the HRB, please submit an application.
I think my bandwidth is, I don't have.
Yeah,
bandwidth.
you're restoring old houses, aren't you?
Yeah, so you're on.
No, but I really do think you should talk to the planning department and really understand what those incentives, how they would affect you, whether it's height limits, those, square foot limits, how the building codes can help you in certain ways. I don't think anyone, if they were redoing their front porch and you have a beautiful, railing that's at 34 inches, want to put in a 42-inch high railing and completely, disrupt the appearance of your house. And so there's just things that you have to kind of realize are there for your use, that are there to help benefit you as an owner of a home. Plus, if the Mills Act was adopted, it can be a huge tax savings. And so if anything, I would encourage the city, go to the city council and say, get the Mills Act going because we want to use it. Yeah, get the Mills Act going.
City doesn't want to put its money where its mouth is.
Well,
They've rejected it.
I don't know.
It's expensive to them to do it.
I don't think it's expensive so much for us. It's there's been concerns expressed about money to the school district, this kind of thing. So it's more of a complicated issue, but certainly I'm happy to send you the Mills Act tailored pilot program that's been published in our HRB agendas in the past, public information, if you want to see what the HRB was considering and would like to move forward on.
Yeah,
So,
we've seen it. Yeah.
okay.
I don't know, cannibalize, well, their concern is that the money cannibalizing the school.
It's about taxes being diverted from some things into other things. Right.
Do you want, since we're not doing it, yeah.
Yeah, so we don't really have time because we're out of time now. But we're to take this meeting further to talk in depth about incentives and such. And so, but we'll put this PowerPoint online. There's some slides we haven't presented, but it was valuable time spent to clarify some things that were very of concern to this group. So we're glad we spent the time. And like I said, if you want to think about reaching out to us, we're here for you, and we can have individual conversations about your
before
property.
you leave, thank you for coming here tonight.
How do we contact you if we do have questions?
You can send me an email, amy.french@cityofpaloalto.org. You're welcome to do Amy, AMY FRENCH. So I'm the HRB staff liaison. And I have, I'm the
City of Palo Alto.
City of Palo, yeah, amy.french@cityofpaloalto.org. And reach out if you don't have your DPR form, the form that was prepared in 2000. I can send that to you. I can send you a parcel report. I can send you other things.
What's a DPO?
This is the Department of Parks and Recreation. It's a California State Department. And that was the forms that were used in 1997 to describe your property and why it's eligible. Yeah.
Amy, oh, sorry.
City Hall, you said not the county clerk or anything, but in City Hall.
I work for the planning department.
Okay.
So if you wanted to visit me in person, you probably should email me to set that up because I'm not in my office 24/7.
So I want to just ask, if we do scan this card, does that bring up your information too? Your contact information?
It's the web page that we shared earlier, the Reconnaissance survey web page. And so we'll show it now, what you'll see if you use that.
Yes. Yeah, many thanks to everyone for coming tonight.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
All right, thank you.